I'm Cecilia here in Fresno, yes. For the people that are in the chat, I saw some of the people here representing the Central Valley. I'm the Central Valley Program Coordinator, and I am beyond happy to introduce the new Executive Director of the CUR Foundation, the CUR magazine. For some of you might not know, or some that you know, is the world's largest lesbian magazine. And Jasmine Sudarkasa is the new executive director who's going to be moderating the panel today for the amazing speakers that you see on the screen. And without further ado, Jasmine, please take the mic.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Cecilia. I hope that I live up to that intro. I have to say that right now. So just a quick check-in with the administrators. Would you like me to introduce the rest of our panelists? You could just give me a nod if you would. I'll make sure that I do. Okay, great. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the second portion of this conversation. I am very lucky to moderate a conversation with Representative Park Cannon from Georgia, the 58th District. Sarah Pope, who is a fellow, I believe, philanthropy person, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, who joins us from the Victory Institute, and Amber Whittington, otherwise known as Amber's Closet, an influencer, activist, and actor who I used to follow on Instagram before this, so I feel really stoked that I'm here today. So, I'm very excited to talk to you guys today. I think this is going to be a fun conversation. I really encourage you to drop your questions in the chat. And I'll share a little bit more about me at the end. I think I'll get started because we're a little bit behind. Great. And I would love to start with Representative Cannon on this question, but the thing that I've heard the most this Pride is how commercialized it is. I was in the grocery store the other day and heard an advertisement for all of the suppliers of the grocery store that identify as LGBTQIA+. So that's just to tell you where we are. And with that has come this question about what it means to be out as a political action, possibly with very serious consequences. We think about our history. Being out as a political act, first and foremost, has not always been something to be celebrated or particularly safe. And so for my panelists, starting with Representative Cannon, what does being out as a political action mean to you?
Thank you for having me. I hope that my audio is favorable and that you're able to hear me. Because what I want to share is that when I decided to run for office at age 24, there were so many individuals and systems that told me the reasons why I could not, instead of telling me the reasons why I could. And one of those main reasons was because I identified as queer, not as a lesbian. What they were telling me was there's some normalization to lesbian elected officials. And as a community, we know in 2015, that really wasn't very true. It wasn't very safe. It wasn't very normalized. But for some reason, this idea that, yeah, if you run as a lesbian, you might be okay and you might get elected. But if you run as queer, how are you going to do that? Are you going to come out at every door that you knock? Is every event going to be LGBTQ specific? And I had to really pull back and say, absolutely not. I have so many identities. I have locked hair. There are no elected officials with locked hair. I'm the youngest member. There are no members under the age of 30, and the list goes on and on. So I really hope that others will continue to take the understanding that even being out as an elected official, I don't spend every day telling people about that one part of my identity. I talk to them about the issues that are related to it and make sure that they can get a humanizing perspective on it. What I'll quickly say is, for example, HIV. We used to not have a department in our health department for women as it relates to HIV. And women within the LGBTQ community were the ones who were on the front lines requesting the Department of Public Health do that, so that not only would our community of queer and lesbian women have HIV support services, but also the rest of our rainbow family and friends.
Wow, that is so compelling. I think this idea of sort of nuance and I am a full person, right? But this is a big part of who I am is really topical. And I think I would pass it to Amber next, actually. I think, as someone who is very public facing now, what does out specifically as a political commitment mean for you?
First, hey everyone, how's it going? Jasmine, where are you on Instagram so I can follow you too? I'm really excited to be here. Thanks, Shay. Everybody was here. It was really, I just have to say it was really inspiring. Obviously, like I look up to Park and Sharice for like going from zero to Congress, and Shay and I talk about that often because that's something I would love to do one day. Anyway, so I had to start with that. I know, don't ask Shay. I should have been running already. But anyways, hi, I'm happy to be here. And I don't even remember what the question was. I'm so excited. But
I'll repeat it. What does being out as a political choice mean to you?
Oh, okay. First of all, let me say that like when I decided to explode out of the closet because it took me so long, I didn't even realize it was political until people started calling me an activist by allowing just because I was loving myself and not afraid to put my content on the internet. And I was like, I'm an activist because of that. And that's when I realized that it is political for a lot of people to be queer, a woman, and then a woman of color to love myself. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, if that's the thing, then I'm gonna continue to do me. But I already had a love for changing things for the better in my own way, however I could. And so being political is just a part of who I am. If I see something that's not right, I'm going to try to do my part into changing it, making better for the next person. That's just how I am. So I'm political because I love myself, and that's fine.
The personal is political. I had to invoke our high priestess in this particular room. Okay. So, Sarah, I would love to hear you weigh in on the question as well. What does it mean to be out as a specifically political action for you?
Yeah, absolutely. To echo what Amber said, I'm just so excited to be here and love sharing the stage with folks. To give a little bit of background of how I'm involved in this political sphere, I work for LGBTQ Victory Institute, and it is our goal to get as many LGBTQ folks into government, all the way down from mosquito commissioner, where we have that available in states like Florida, all the way up to US Congress, like Representative Davids, who is one of our pioneers of bringing in more LGBTQ representation to Congress. And so for me, working for an organization whose motto is representation matters, I think that's often where my answer really comes back to, where I'm so excited to be sharing a stage with folks like Amber and Rep Cannon, because with Rep Cannon, she's one of the folks that we often highlight and say, like, she changed the way in Georgia representing queer folks. For me, as someone who identifies as queer, you often don't see that label or that identity in a political role. And so it was so exciting for me when I found out that was how Rep Cannon, self-identified. And for me, I find a lot of the power in, again, with that representation matters, you can't be what you can't see. And for me, I grew up in the DC area. I was pretty familiar with politics. I remember getting into a little bit of a bicker in 4th grade with a girl who her parents had voted for Bush, mine had voted for Gore, and I was telling her, he is a bad man. I am so mad that your parents voted for Bush. And I want to clarify, I do work for a nonpartisan organization. This is my personal stance against Bush. But I really recognized as I was in that young age in middle school, as I started to get more engaged, I didn't see people who reminded me of me. And that was something that kept motivating me. And then when I had the opportunity to join Victory Institute, for me, it's really important that we have women in particular represented. When queer women run, they win at higher rates than any other LGBTQ group. And so queer women have what it takes. Women are amazing leaders. I know that Ignite is here to definitely back that up, that women, young women, especially because so many of these experiences do overlap and intersect. Danica Rowan, the delegate in Virginia, the first trans person to win in a state legislature, when she was running, people kept saying, oh, you're trans, why are you running? How can you represent everyone? And she said, my issue is this one road that keeps having really bad congestion. Trans people get stuck in traffic too. And so all of these issues are so intersectional, they all can represent us in many different ways. So it's important to have our lived experiences in the room to represent them and really say, this is why it matters that we're here.
Wow. I mean, I think being in a room today with this many people that are interested in this subject matter, as someone who was a political science major many years ago, is so enlightening, having sat at so many discussion tables with only white men talking over me. So I'm particularly excited to be in the room with this group. And I want to talk a little bit about visibility in part, but some of the loneliness that sometimes comes with being a leader in particular, but a leader who's trying to move power. So part of the reason why I took this job at Curve is I'm really interested in the histories of who we are as a community. And that started with actually an observation of the political climate. As we know, Barbara Jordan, famously closeted for most of her career. Similarly, Lorraine Hainsbury, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun and who was the first Black woman to premiere a play on Broadway, was also famously closeted until her death. And one of the things that she said is that the thing that makes you exceptional, if you are at all, is inevitably that which also makes you lonely. And so I'm curious to my panelists, what is lonely or difficult about this work? And how do you overcome it? And I'd love to start with Amber, because you have thousands of social media folks, but I'm sure that there are times that this work gets hard and gets lonely. And so what do you do to overcome that?
Yeah, definitely. Over time, it like throughout the time, because I've been doing this for a while. I've been putting, this year is going to be, I think, 9 years that I've been putting content on YouTube, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, there's times where I've definitely felt alone because I felt on the first couple years on the internet, if there was other like queer people or lesbians, they more so looked at each other as competition instead of trying to, collab and support each other. And that was really hard because I started to feel alienated as I started to grow. And then, so I really had to I had to literally kind of pull people together and say, hey, that's not how it goes. Like, let's, support each other. We can actually grow together. So there's times with that. And then it's been hard throughout the years. When I talk about certain subjects, like the political subjects that are necessary, equality, police brutality, I've been demonetized. And I was a struggling creator for years because people didn't realize that YouTube was taking videos down, they were demonetizing me. And so I had to find a way for my voice to survive. And it's just crazy that now it's come back around and those same brands are looking, you're trying to book me now for the same thing that I was demonetized before. But okay, that's fine, I'm here. But when you put yourself out there and then there's a lot of people on the internet that don't vibe with you, they make that very clear with harsh words. So there's times where that can feel hard, but I try to surround myself with a lot of my friends that do the same thing or like-minded in some way. And so at times, I feel very lucky that at times where I felt low, I had them to kind of go to and kind of pull me out of that really dark hole that I've been in sometimes. And I'm a Virgo, so I overthink, I overanalyze, and I put myself in that dark hole a lot of times. So it's really just like remembering that I'm lucky to be where I am and have a voice and try to speak up for others and try to just do my part in encouraging others to be representation and getting them to realize that their voice matters. So that's all I care about now is just trying to uplift others to speak up and stand up and use their voice so we can get to the part where we all feel equal in this country.
Yeah. Fellow Virgo, by the way, feel you on that.
Hey.
Representative Cannon, do you have the proverbial dark hole that you navigate? What do you look to kind of deal with that, especially when you're knocking on maybe the Capitol doors? How do you ground yourself? How do you deal with the hard times?
That is true. Back in March, you might have heard, I was at work one day. It was a long day. Everything was normal. And all of a sudden, it became very unusual. There were officers on me. They dragged me out of the state capitol. I spent hours in a jail, had no connectivity to anyone, and really felt like, what is this moment? Is this a form of punishment? And if so, what am I being punished for? What I realized was, in fact, that there were other connections that were happening in that moment. And I hope that many of us can find those connections with whatever cultures that we, recognize. For me, it's kind of a little bit of Southern Baptism, a little bit of witchy queerness, a little bit of this and that, a little bit of Santeria. And so I had to start to realize that there were cosmic connections I was having with people like Rosa Parks and Dr. King, feeling really intently who move through those. I wanted to be as positive as possible. So I have started to look at my logos again. Our logo has always been glasses because it says forward thinking and looking out for you, and trying to put on a new lens with anything that comes our way, anything that we see. So I had to do that. And right now, what I remember, the most about some of those darkest times is just feeling like there's some level of spiritual connection that I don't actually want to understand, but I don't want to get in the way of. So I'd rather just be a vessel. I hope that many of us can continue to be vessels for political progress.
I relate to that so deeply. And I think articulating that out loud and not being afraid to name that as a part of your arsenal, I just have a lot of gratitude for that, because I wish that I'd heard that when I was in college, because I knew it was something I was connected to, but I wasn't entirely sure of what to call it. So just thank you for naming that. If it's okay with you, Sarah, I'm going to move to our next question, because I think it's a good one for you in particular, but also I want to have time for questions from other people. And by the way, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I will ask them. No question is off limits. I have no shame. Okay. The next question that I have for you, Sarah, is one of the things I love about Ignite, and the reason why I agreed to do this, is that it really does work very hard to build the agency and political power of young women. And I think that is something that is honestly one of the most dynamic and catalytic forces this country has to offer, right? So I'm going to ask you, what is something that you wish you'd known in your late teens or early 20s about what it takes to build power?
Oh, that is such a great question. And part of the reason why I'm so excited to partner with organizations like Ignite, and to have someone like Shay, who has always been someone I've looked up to, who really helps hype people up. So wow, what does it mean to have power? Can you repeat that?
Build power. Yeah, I'll say it again. So what is something that you wish you'd known in your late teens or early 20s about what it takes to build power?
I think honestly, just knowing that it was possible. When I was 18, I was still pretty shy. I had been, the kind of kid who went to classes, followed all the rules, would do a little thing here or there to try to stick out, but definitely kind of kept to myself. I didn't think I had ideas to share. I didn't think I had things that were really, that someone needed to know or wanted to know. I didn't think of myself as a leader. I thought of myself as someone who would support the leaders, would be there to kind of raise them up, be more in the background. I never would think I would do a panel like this, where just in front of people talking about LGBTQ issues. And so I think for me, I wish I had known about organizations like Ignite. I wish I had known about organizations like Victory. For us, we've recognized there are not enough women in politics. There are not enough LGBTQ women in politics. And it was up to us to be leaders and say, there is no research on LGBTQ women. What can we do to fix that? And so we endeavored in a project last year through generous funding from the Ascend Fund, which I know Ignite is also a part of, where we're all working together to make sure that we get more women into political office, and all doing it from our different angles, where I kind of represent the LGBTQ folks in the room. But of course, that's not to say that there are not LGBTQ folks with Ignite. Clearly, there are so many amazing folks that intersect with Ignite, but that we can all come together and bring folks resources, that we can say, what's the issue? How can we approach this? So when we noticed there weren't women in political office, this year we launched an LGBTQ women's mentorship program, where now we are able to pair folks with mentors. We're going to do sessions that cover issues specific to women, some of the challenges like imposter syndrome, which if I were 18 and had someone say, hey, imposter syndrome is real, let's talk about it, that would have helped me build my power. So I feel very fortunate to be in a role where I can help bring people to the resources, where we all contain these multitudes, we all contain the ability to build power, to be leaders. It's just getting to those resources. And so I love being a conduit for that.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for being that conduit. Amber, what do you think? What does it take? And I can repeat the question if you need me to. Would you like me to? Sure. So what is something that you wish you'd known in your late teens or early 20s about what it takes to build power?
Yeah, I guess I don't even know how to answer that because I think I still struggle with that. Because especially being scared to step it up in a way where it puts me in the positions that I would like to have the power to make the right decisions, right? I move I move in my life to try to get into circles or find the right ways. Like I moved downtown LA to understand the homeless issue that we had. Like I wanted to live in it. I wanted to be in it. I have the Medicare like everyone else. And I said, if I'm able to be blessed to be in a position to be a political leader or have that power to make decisions, I want to be so closely connected to everyone else that I know exactly what everybody's going through. And that's kind of how I decide to navigate things. And so the only thing that I thought of that I wish I could tell myself is just to come out of the closet and be who I am earlier. And I think the only thing that I wasn't able to that I didn't do from when I was younger is become a lawyer because I thought that that's what I had to do to be a politician. And just like, Rep. Sharice David said earlier, if Trump can do it, and that's what really opened my eyes. And then seeing people like Rep. Cannon and Sharice be able to do it is really like, oh, okay, this is what I have to do. So actually being able to see them do it is, in the last couple of years, I've been trying to learn how do you step it up to get that power to be in the position that they're in. So I'm actually still learning. And so I think, inspirations like them for being able to break through and do that so that others, like everybody in this room, can figure out how to get to that power, to even get to run. That's a lot. Like I'm scared of that thought sometimes when I think of it, even though that's something I want to do so much, but you need kind of power to have those connections to even run. And then getting elected is a whole nother thing. So yeah.
But this is the place to be if you want to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Rep. Cannon, will you close us out? What do you wish you knew? I think you're on mute, by the way.
Absolutely. I was trying to think about this quote. I'm proud to be one of the only people who speak Spanish at the state capitol. And one day, someone came to the capitol and basically said to me, ser poderosa es ser vulnerable. To be powerful is to be vulnerable. And I really felt like I could resonate with that. I've shared so much of my family's life that sometimes when people see my mom, and she's my best friend, they are probably thinking other stories of her because they've heard it online or they've seen it online. And so I've had to think about what are the levels to my vulnerability, and if I take all these levels, will I gain more power? And I just had to decide that it wasn't about that for me. It was about more to what Sarah was saying and Amber was saying, which is that connectivity, being able to understand if someone comes to the Capitol and says to you, please, I'd love to pass a law about domestic violence. I can't tell you more about what's happening or what's happened in my family situation. For me to understand that intrinsically and not to pry them more, like one of my 75-year-old colleagues would, which would say, who did it? Who hit you? Did you file a police report? Are you sure? To really have that trauma-informed care by just being a person of lived experience, I think is so powerful. And I'm proud to be a person of that type of power. I'm proud to fail in front of the world. I had to start rethinking about this idea of what failing means. And one of my colleagues from the Stanford School of Design started talking about this idea of FAIL being the first attempt in learning. And so really getting this idea that even if I'm failing in my mind, I might be failing forward for the culture or for the community. And at the end of the day, it's my first attempt in learning. And that's all right with me.
I really appreciate the quote that you just shared about power and vulnerability. I think to be fully vulnerable and a wholehearted person, as Brene Brown would call it, is one of the most challenging acts we can do. I would just offer to this question that I think I would tell myself that it's okay to be powerful. I am 6 feet tall. I am someone who plays with all kinds of gendered expectations in the way that I show up in the world. And I felt for a long time that I wasn't womanly enough if I claimed the full resonance and power of my being, especially in relation to men. And I'll tell you what, once I started throwing these shoulders back and looking people in the eye, I got a lot more yeses than I got nos. And so I think just standing in the fact that queerness allows us to reinvent what it means to be whatever we are. That's the whole point of it. And I think just standing in that with some actual confidence and saying, like, yeah, I am taller than most of the men at this organization, and I'm going to own that shit. Excuse my French, but that's what it is, I think has been really helpful for me. Oh, the chat is the best place to be in here. Okay, so we have time for questions. Does anyone have a question that they want to offer, either on camera or in chat? Let me give it a minute. Right, it's the chat for me. Okay, well, while you're marinating on some questions, I will ask a sort of I don't want to say a bonus question because it's an important one, but I want to give it the time that it deserves. So for me at Curb in particular, sort of the intersectionality of our community really matters. So Curb is a lesbian magazine, but at the foundation, we stretched ourselves to really make sure that we're making room to support our transgender and non-binary siblings in community. And so for any of our panelists, I'm just curious, how do we extend ourselves to build power for our trans and non-binary siblings? Like, how do we show up as allies? What can we do to extend ourselves for those of us that identify as cisgender or trans women? How do we show up for those the other people in our community? Go ahead, Representative Cannon, please.
I would like to quickly lead into this question by just saying it bluntly. Call into question the diversity of the team members of your elected officials. I am so proud to be openly queer, but I'm more proud every day that one of my team members who's trans walks into the state capitol, regardless of being misgendered, regardless of Georgia being a state where you cannot change your gender marker unless you've had a really invasive surgery. And so having to show identification that is triggering, then go up elevators and be in tight quarters with white men who are vile and racist bigots, and then actually do the policy work and pay attention to the constituent concerns and give that care back to people when they want to share their stories with their government officials. That's what I'm more proud of. And the only way that we can do it is by being in lockstep. You know, today we have another representative in Georgia, Representative Renita Shannon, who also has a member of the trans community on her staff. So we're in the same office area, and our larger administrative assistant, she's had her mess ups, but we've seen her grow over the past 2 years. And if we can grow country white women just by being ourselves and having our team members reflect our community, I just almost can't imagine how far we could get once we do actually have transgender elected officials in Georgia. And so I hope that you will go home, that you will go to openstates.org, you will type in your address, you will find out who your elected official is, and you will contact them. And you will ask them about the diversity of their staff. And if they become defensive, provide them with resumes. Help them understand the organizations that are there, because this is the culture change. We want someone from our community picking up the phone, talking to someone when they are reporting a hate crime for being LGBTQ. That would be some real change that I wouldn't even have to, as a representative, experience, but we would be able to address if we took it seriously.
Well, that is the proverbial mic drop I think we needed. We are right at time on our segment for this panel. And so I'm going to use my last few minutes to say, Ashe, Representative Cannon. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Amber, for your vulnerability, your personability, and really showing up to this as your full selves. I wish that I had people like you to look up to 10 years ago. I think I'd be even sicker than I am now.